George Yardley was the very first player that played for the Pistons franchise that you could call the greatest Piston of all time. Now that we've had players like Bob Lanier, Isaiah Thomas, Dave Bing, he's probably not the greatest Piston of all time anymore, but he was still a very good basketball player, a lethal scorer, and his time with the Pistons is certainly worth talking about. He probably gets a little bit forgotten because he played during the 1950s, but him and Larry Faust were the two most notable players that were able to lead the Pistons to their first ever NBA Finals appearances. Granted, they were the Fort Wayne Pistons at the time, but they were the first to take the Pistons to the championship round. But before we move any further, I think it is important that I show you this very limited footage of Yardley that I was able to find. As you can probably see, the shot mechanics from back then were a lot different than they are today. And the way the game was played back then was a lot different than the way the game is played today. Would the way that Yardley played be able to translate to today? I don't know. But at the very least, he deserves his respects for his contributions to this franchise. So with all of that out of the way now, let's go ahead and talk about Yardley's contributions to the Pistons. George Yardley got into the Hall of Fame in 1996. He was a 6-time All-Star, 5 of them being with the Pistons. He was a 2-time All-NBA, both of them with the Pistons. He was a 1-time scoring champion, and he was the first player to ever score 2,000 points in a season. Yardley played 384 games with the Pistons, and in those 384 games, he contributed 7,339 points, which ranked 18th in Pistons history. He grabbed 3,537 rebounds, which ranked 13th in Pistons history. He shot 2,876 free throws, which ranked 9th in Pistons history. His 19.1 points per game with the Pistons ranked 10th in Pistons history. He shot 41.4% from the field and 77.8% from the free throw line. Now, that 41.4% from the field is not good by today's standards, but we will get to that momentarily. He also averaged 9.2 rebounds per game with the Pistons, 1.7 assists per game, and shot 7.5 free throws per game, which ranked 5th in Pistons history. Now, where did this production rank through 1980, before Isaiah Thomas came in and Ben Wallace came in and Joe Dumars came in and stuff like that? His 7,339 points ranked 6th in Pistons history through 1980. His total rebounds ranked 7th. His total free throw attempts ranked 5th. His 19.1 points per game ranked 5th. His 9.2 rebounds per game ranked 12th through 1980. And his 7.5 free throw attempts per game ranked 2nd in Pistons history. Now, in terms of some notable seasons and games that Yardley had, he scored 52 points in a game, which is currently a Pistons record as far as I know. The box scores from the earlier days of basketball are incomplete, but for now, he is the current record holder for most points scored in a game in Pistons history. His 5 seasons of averaging 17 points per game or more are top 9. His 4 seasons of averaging 17 points per game and 9 rebounds per game ranked 3rd. His 3 seasons of averaging 20 or more points per game ranked top 9. And his 2 20 and 10 seasons being 20 points and 10 assists or 20 points and 10 rebounds are top 4 in Pistons history. In the 1957-58 season, Yardley averaged 27.8 points per game. Those numbers are good enough to be the second most points per game in a season in Pistons history. And even after all this time has passed, his 2,001 points in that season are the 5th most total points scored in a season in Pistons history. Now, I mentioned earlier that his field goal percentage was not all that beautiful. However, for his time, he was top 10 in field goal percentage 4 times. This is including his time with the Nationals as well. He was top 10 in true shooting percentage 5 times, and he was top 10 in points per game 4 times. And it should be noted that he only played 8 seasons in the NBA. Now, with the field goal and true shooting percentages, are players just that much better now than they were back then? Were there just a bunch of defensive rule changes that helped players today compared to back then? It's probably a combination of both. But with the true shooting percentage, that is heavily heavily affected by the fact that we have 3-pointers now, and we did not have 3-pointers during Yardley's time. So George Yardley and Larry Faust were the first players to lead the Pistons to an NBA Finals. The Pistons did not win either of their appearances, but they got there. So let's talk about Yardley's contributions to getting his team to the Finals. In the 1954-55 season, the Pistons went 43-29, which was tied for the best record in the NBA. In the regular season, Yardley led the Pistons with 17.3 points per game. He was second on his team with 9.9 rebounds, and he was fifth on his team with 2.1 assists. During the playoffs, Yardley averaged 15.8 points per game, which again led the Pistons. His 9 rebounds per game were second, and his 3.3 assists per game were second as well. In the Western Division Finals, which was the series that got the Pistons to the Finals, Yardley led his team in points per game with 16 and total points with 64. The rebounding and assist numbers for that series are unavailable. In the 1955-56 season, Yardley helped the Pistons get a 37-35 record, which was the third best record in the NBA and the first best record in the Western Division. In the regular season, Yardley averaged 17.4 points per game, which led the Pistons. He also led the Pistons in rebounding with 9.7, and he was fifth on the Pistons with 2.2 assists. During the playoffs, Yardley averaged 23 points per game, 13.9 rebounds per game, and 2.6 assists per game. He led the Pistons in points and rebounds. During the Western Division Finals, which was, like I said earlier, the series that got the Pistons to the Finals, Yardley led his team in total points with 106 and points per game with 21.2. Rebounding and assist numbers during that series are currently unavailable. So George Yardley was definitely a great Piston player, and he most certainly deserves to be viewed as a Piston great, whether it was for the Fort Wayne Pistons or the Detroit Pistons. In Yardley's case, it was mostly with Fort Wayne. That will be all for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.